Hello and welcome to another episode of the People Podcast. I'm Naseer Mohammed, founder of Ethos of HR. And today I am joined by Ben Beveridge from hireful. And we're talking about recruitment in the UK, what's changing, what SMEs are struggling with, and what organizations should be doing differently. So, Ben, great to have you on. Uh, let's start with you. Could you tell me a little bit about yourself, your role at hireful, and also a bit of what kind of organizations are you working with?
Yeah, no problem. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here today. I always love coming on to talk about recruitment. I've probably a bit about myself, really. So I've been in recruitment probably 20 years, almost to the year. So a decent bit of experience. I've seen it kind of the landscape change quite a lot through that time as well. So that 20 years has been a real mixture from joining as a graduate, completely green to the sector, to transitioning into becoming a 360 recruitment consultant agent, running an agency division as well. I've also then moved in-house. I was a group talent lead for a medium-sized organisation in the UK, and I started that role, I would say, in a standalone position. So I was the group lead, but I was on my own, and I then had a small team within that role. And then most recently, I've obviously come to hireful, and my official title at hireful is head of recruitment and customer success. Quite fancy job title, but really, what does that mean? So my role really for hireful is bringing that recruitment expertise, and that would be working with clients, not just with the hireful ATS software, which is brilliant. If you don't know who we are, check us out. My role really is fundamentally about, you could have the best recruitment software in the world, but actually, if your recruitment strategy isn't supporting you enough, then that recruitment system is ultimately going to sit there and isn't going to offer a whole heap of value to you. So it's looking at lots of different bits that could cause friction or could cause challenges, sorting those out, understanding them, working with our customers, and then seeing that through to ultimately success as well. And then kind of part of my role is also make sure everybody's understanding the features and getting the most out of new features that are being released into the software as well. But the main focus is on that recruitment strategy piece.
And I think that interestingly gives you enough exposure, I guess, to have a very strong view of what's happening today across different organizations. So if we zoom it out a little bit, uh, what, according to you, what are we actually currently seeing in the UK recruitment market, particularly at the SME level?
Yeah. So I think across the SME market, I think the biggest challenge that I think they're seeing, and generally what we are seeing is, there's a lot of SMEs out there that are perhaps, with the economy, not necessarily, I don't want to use the word struggling, but maybe are probably more cost conscious than they have been for a while, or certainly the last few years. They've been certainly looking at those costs more, and that cost could be headcount, it could be training, it could be investment in new tech. And that can obviously bring its own challenges when you're trying to retain, hire, or being able to afford to hire new people into the marketplace. And perhaps maybe, even running slightly leaner teams than they perhaps would like to, which means when it comes to hiring a position in the marketplace, you might be looking for more of somebody, a jack of all trades almost, rather than having the the ease of maybe saying, okay, right, we just need somebody good who's good to do this. That's no longer okay. So they need to be good at this, and I also need to be good at that. And those skill sets is sometimes a little bit hard to find within the marketplace for those SMEs who need a little bit more agility within those functions, and then obviously paying might become a challenge for them as well. So a couple of kind of headwind challenges for them as well. But I think as we talk today, hopefully what we'll be aiming to do is brainstorming and bring forward some opportunities that actually
Exactly,
SMEs
yes.
can do really, really well that maybe other enterprise organizations can't. So there's still a lot of positives to being an SME when it comes to that recruitment market.
So now in your role, you've said that you are, you're responsible for recruitment. So what, according to you, do you really think has changed uh, in this market in the last 12 to 18 or to 24 months?
Yeah, definitely. I think the elephant in the room is obviously going to be AI. Everybody knows that, so we can we'll touch on that a little bit, but obviously, that's nothing new, and there's probably thousands of podcasts probably being made today about AI in recruitment.
They are.
So we won't,
Yes.
we won't make it all about AI. But what I would say is a few things have changed really. I think it's candidate market slightly. Again, touching on kind of what we talked about earlier with the economy and maybe people more kind of adverse to risk. Talk about kind of companies, at risk of spending money. There's also kind of the candidate risk. So candidates might want a new job, might want a new challenge, but they're working for an organization where they feel safe. That company maybe feels stable. Okay, right, actually, maybe I just ride out the storm where I am rather than moving to an unknown and riding out the storm. So sometimes that passive market is even more passive than it used to be. So the real active candidates on the market, they might be, less kind of, motivated to move. Perhaps you have to think about that as a bit of an angle. So that has certainly changed in terms of how we attract and who's on the market, who's available, and why those candidates might want to move. It's not just about salary. It's not just about promotion. Sometimes about are you a secure job for me to go to? Because we also see, constantly, redundancies or downsizing can happen as well. And I think the other bit as well is where perhaps SMEs used to rely on where they would find talent from. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Indeed at the moment. So Indeed, brilliant platform, got their name, probably the biggest job board in the world. I think that's what they market it at anyway. And it used to be that you could post to Indeed for free, and it was great.
Mm.
And it still is the case. It still is the case for a lot of people. But Indeed are kind of changing their own landscape and actually shifting the landscape slightly now. Where if you're an SME, especially, and you don't have an ATS, then they are limiting the amount of free advertising you can do.
Yes.
So I think it might be, you read it, your listeners or your watchers might know more than me, but it might be about 3 a month. I think something around that sort of mark, unless you have an ATS that's integrated with Indeed, and then that opens up the feed more. But even if you have an ATS, Indeed are still getting, a little bit more driven by revenue, and they're still approaching those clients and saying, well, you've had X amount of free candidates from us, or you've had X amount of free jobs from us. We actually would now like you to start paying for the service, which sounds nice. It sounds polite, but Indeed will just turn your jobs off. So there's kind of a little bit more kind of like risk there. I think it's that SME market in terms of, if you end up not being able to advertise on Indeed, what else do you do? So I think maybe part of maybe the changes now is thinking, how can we set ourselves up for success in maybe a world where we don't have as much access to Indeed for free as well. And we can maybe go on to some of those strategies. Some of the strategies we talk about in this podcast might help with that type of kind of risk as well. And I said I wasn't going to talk about AI, but obviously AI and automation is nearly in everything we do. But
it is everywhere.
Yeah. But I think the biggest shift we're seeing is not necessarily from SMEs or internal recruiters or HR using AI to do recruitment. It's actually candidates using AI. writing the CV, writing a cover letter, doing my interview prep, all of that kind of bit is almost it's hard to identify if you're having a genuine conversation with a candidate about their real experience, or they almost become like an actor and they've learned the AI script of what a good answer is, and therefore we're unable to ascertain if it's a good answer, but is it actually a truthful answer based on their experience, or is
Yes.
it just they've been able to regurgitate and make it sound like a good answer and it's a lie?
And I think that if anyone wants to even learn a bit more about how AI has impacted in recruitment, they can watch one of my podcast episodes I have done with Adrian McDonough, who is the co-founder of Hireful, and very passionate about artificial intelligence. We had a long discussion because I love artificial intelligence. I'm not going to deny that, but I think that really this is where it really starts getting interesting, because I don't think it's just the market which is a challenge right now. It's also how quickly the expectations of candidates are also shifting. They and expectations also from organizations are shifting. So it's not just the market which is a problem, but I think it's just the entire structure when it comes to recruitment is a challenge today. So which leads me really well to my next question to you, Ben, is what do you think are the biggest recruitment challenges SMEs are right now facing?
Yeah, so I think it's if we just stick with the AI bit, because obviously we segued into that quite nice, and the candidates, I think it's becoming harder, especially for hiring managers. So we talk about recruiters or HR people in HR who are maybe slightly closer to the everyday tasks around recruitment and candidates as well, but not saying I'm not saying this will probably still affect them as well, but certainly hiring managers who maybe used to get 20, 30 applications and they're going through screening them. And it might be easier for them to say, okay, like, out of these 30, these 8 are good. Now what tends to be happening is probably one of two things. 30 candidates now look good because they've put their CV through into AI and they've said, here's your job spec. Change my CV or write my CV to make me sound like a really, really good candidate. Now, there's still going to be ones in there that are going to be obviously not relevant because you can only gain your CV so far. But the ones that were average beforehand that weren't quite good enough now look like they're good enough to get an interview. So it's quite hard for hiring managers to understand it. And also, it's much easier now with tech. Quick apply, Indeed, one click apply. Same with LinkedIn, Reed, or a job boards have these one click applies where it's really easy now for candidates to apply for jobs, and it's also really easy for candidates again to tailor those CVs for jobs as well. So those 30 applications now might be becoming 50, 60. And then again, how do you find the time to get through them? And how do you know if you are the good candidates? And again, interview skill set now for hiring managers, I think is really, really important. I speak to a number of clients who are now working on revisiting all that hiring manager training in terms of interview technique, how to write a good job advert, how to write a good job spec, what's a good interview question, to ask, and how to probe. I think the probing bit's really key.
Yes.
As well. So a lot of it is down to that. I think the biggest challenge is the education piece, because the candidates are moving faster with AI and technology than we're able to move internally with AI and technology because we can't afford it. We haven't had it paid for. We don't have a policy around how to use AI in our business, so therefore we're not using it. Because we want to be fair as well, because the security risks can come with using AI quite openly without doing it in the kind of the correct way. And therefore, there is a bit of a disadvantage, really, between how quick our knowledge can develop in-house with our hiring managers and our HR teams and keep abreast of everything with what information and AI tools that candidates have access to. And I think the big challenge there that SMEs are perhaps facing is the time to learn it, the time to implement it in real time versus the challenge of actually hiring people in at the same time, because you're working in a kind of a live world of having open vacancies saying we've got people missing from our team. We need to get these backfilled. We need people starting. But there's more and more work to be done. And we're not kind of like taking the time to kind of upskill, pause, and educate ourselves and have those conversations about, well, what are the risks? What else can we do differently? It kind of just feels a bit like a pressure cooker. When I speak to some organizations, it's like there's more and more that I'm being challenged with, and there's more and more that I'm having to give back internally to the business. And yet I'm still having the same amount of vacancies to fill,
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So the work's coming faster and faster in terms of what we have to do and what we have to deliver. Well, which is why I think these podcasts and these questions and these conversations that are really important that we can have, that hopefully, anybody watching or listening, hopefully can take maybe like one idea away or one positive action that might make their lives a little bit easier.
Exactly.
So the conversation is super important.
And I think that's where it's really important for organizations to understand that it's not a strategy they need to look at. They need to look at the entire recruitment structure. It's not just saying we need to fill vacancies, but they need to answer who, what, when, where, why, how kind of a response now is. And I think that's, and what, according to you, do you really think that is what the organizations are getting typically wrong at this stage? Is that the approach which is wrong, or is there something else out there which the listeners would love to know?
I think AI and automation, there's so much noise around it that it's you almost, I feel that there's that almost that social marketing or social influence kind of like pressure that you should be doing it.
Yes.
Where and I do think, not to say that don't use AI and don't automate, I think that is critical because AI is only going to get better. It's going to be in every tool, in every kind of software renewal we use in-house. If you have a HR system, an ATS system, a payroll system, whatever you have, those providers will be putting AI into those platforms. So AI and automation is coming. It's here to stay. It's certainly becoming more prevalent in our day-to-day job. So we have to be comfortable embracing it, but in a safe way. But I think even more now, while we've been tasked with doing more with less because we've got leaner teams or smaller budgets, and the candidate market can use AI to kind of almost like game the system where we're not using AI to kind of game it back. So there's a little bit of an unbalance there. It's really getting down to basics. Slowing down, I'd say, which sounds crazy when you're really, really busy. It's like slow down, stop, pause. So when a new vacancy comes up, and then I'll tell you kind of a bit of a personal story. When I first went into my first in-house role, I thought I was, really good at recruitment. So I went from a retcon to in-house. So I was a really good retcon, building relationship with clients, candidates, finding candidates, filling jobs, placing. I really enjoyed that. It was really good. Went in-house and I thought, I'm a really good recruiter. I'm going to do a great job. Give me a job spec. I'll go fill it. What I thought was a good service was a hiring manager would come to me at, 3:30 on a Friday. Ben, just had this vacancy approved. Can we get out for the weekend? It'd be really good to get candidates applying, ASAP. I'm like, do you know what? Yeah, I'll write you an advert. I'll get it out there. The manager's brilliant. Thumbs up, Ben. I leave on a Friday feeling I've done a good job. I come in on Monday, Tuesday. There's no good candidates out applied.
Right.
We'll leave it a few more days. A week's gone by. We've got no candidates. And then we're sitting down. What else can we do, Ben? Because this is critical now. This person's like, now we've got 2 weeks left of their, notice period, and we're not even interviewing yet. I've got, my manager saying, Ben, what's going on? I thought you were good at recruitment. I thought, I am. What's going on? And it wasn't until maybe, I matured a little bit more in my kind of in-house experience where actually, as a recruitment consultant, getting a job out on a Friday ASAP is great for you because you can come in on Monday and see what you've got.
See what you got there, yes.
But in an in-house position, that doesn't work that way. You've got to actually say, do you know what? Okay, why don't we have a meeting on Monday morning and we can go through our options, where we're going to advertise, tell me what you're trying to fill, what's the challenges in the team, what skills have you got, what skills are you missing, what does the external market look like, what's realistic that I can find for you. This is what I need from you in terms of if I find you a good candidate, this is what I expect. And how I expect you to behave. So I need to be looking at CVs on the day I give you a good candidate.
Yes.
And then we need to agree what we're going to do at interview stage now before I've even gone live. And actually waiting 2 or 3 days to put that role live, I found that I was filling roles faster. I was getting better candidates applying, because instead of then having to argue with a hiring manager about, no, I think this is a really good candidate, like option B for you, in their mind, they haven't moved away from option A. So option B to them is a reject. Whereas if we have a conversation at the start, it's surprising that, okay, well, what happens if we can't find this candidate? What do we then do? Oh, well, actually, I could probably get by without this. So if we find somebody with just this experience, I'll probably consider them. Well, what about this person over here? What about a part-time role? What about maybe someone who can work fully remote that has this experience? Would you interview them? And the hiring manager's going, yeah, I would, maybe.
Why not? Yeah.
And then my approach to how I advertise that is completely different. And actually, you have a lot more success. Or if it doesn't work and you're still struggling with candidates, then the hiring manager is prepared for knowing it's a tough role to fill. And then they can then go back in-house to their team and say, how do I structure the workload internally, knowing that this role might take much longer than I anticipated. So I think that really, really helps. And that stops us then, as HR or recruiters and SMEs, firefighting, disappointment from hiring managers, or email tennis saying, what's going on with this? I've sent you some CVs, or I've missed them. Okay, actually, let's interview this candidate, or we're off the market because we took too long. It stops all of those frustrations go out the window, and that frees up so much time. I think that's really, really important to do. And actually, that's often what we forget. And I used to forget that still after I learned the lesson the hard way. I was still getting really, really busy, just throwing stuff out the door, thinking, hopefully this will work. And then regretting it in a week's time, thinking, I just wish I had the conversation.
Should have done this differently, yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly coming back to the point when we say it's the structure which needs to be looked at. And I think it's when people say, oh, well, we need to have a recruitment strategy. I said, yes, you do need to have a recruitment strategy, but can we just have a look at the structure you've built in an organization where you've mentioned that, when you started off, you said about training of the hiring managers, of how job adverts need to be written, or so on. So that really now leads us to really well to my next question. Is we've discussed about the challenges, we've discussed about what's going wrong, but now let's look at if recruitment is going right.
Yes.
For an organization. Now, what does that actually look in practice?
Yeah. So for me, if it's, again, this is just an opinion. I'm not saying like there's so many ways that you can judge if recruitment's gone well. But if recruitment's going well and your process is working effectively, I would say you know it because your hiring manager is not only engaged, your hiring manager is taking responsibility for that vacancy. That's when you know it's going really, really well. And I kind of joke, but also as an underlying tone of deadly seriousness is when I used to work in recruitment, when I was in my in-house role, I used to talk to people and hiring managers and say, I know my job title is group recruitment manager, but my job is actually not to recruit anybody. Generally, I'm not responsible for it. You, as the hiring manager, are responsible for hiring somebody into your team. My job as the group recruitment manager is to facilitate you with the right channels, the right options, the right knowledge, in order for you to hopefully shortlist and have candidates to interview you. Outside of that, if a candidate performs really well at interview or absolutely bombs, it's little outside of my control. If they get offered another job or interview somewhere else, that's outside of my control. I can't force a candidate to accept the job. What I can do is I can try to help you understand what a good candidate experience is, what the market looks like. And hopefully if you do all of those things right, then the hiring manager's engaged, they're curious, they're asking questions. So that's how you kind of, it's going well. The easiest metric is obviously if you've got good candidates you can shortlist. That's ultimately, that's another metric. So we talk about a lot of people talk about KPIs in terms of like time to hire, a hire, source of hire, all of these things. But I think a lot of when I hear, people who I kind of look up to in terms of my peers and what they talk about, and have incredible careers, is they talk about the quality of the shortlist. So if you've got 30 candidates that have applied, and out of those 30 you shortlist 10, then the quality of your shortlisting or the quality of the application is actually reasonably high. If out of those 30 you're shortlisting 2, then something's not working.
Yes.
It's not. You're not quite. Something's broken. You're not telling the right story. You're looking for a skill set that doesn't exist. Your salary doesn't line up to what the market and the skill set should be paying. Or it could just be you're just taking too slow, or the hiring manager isn't aligned to actually what a good CV should look like as well. So that's a really good indicator. It's looking at your conversions from people who apply to people. Either it's the first shortlist, so if you're a recruiter or a HR person, going through sifting the CVs first. So you can call it the first sift, through to second sift. So even from your sift, if you shortlist 10 and the hiring manager only picks one candidate, then there's a disconnect again. The conversion shouldn't be really low when you're looking at from applications to shortlist to hiring manager shortlist, even from shortlist to interview, shouldn't still be that low. I still think that, if you're not getting 60% of the shortlisted candidates the hiring managers picked to come to interview, something again is broken in your process, and that likelihood is down to speed, because you've waited too long to get the candidates in. And
Yes.
Speed can be dictated in, if you're looking for a warehouse operative, they might be on the market for 48 hours. If you're looking for a head of FP&A, they might be on the market, for 6 months until the right opportunity comes up for them, because it depends on how much demand is for their skill set in terms of how many other jobs they're going for as well. So I think your conversions as a metric will help you really understand what is happening, and bottlenecks as well, which is similarly linked to conversion. So you can look at your bottlenecks really simply is, if I give a hiring manager 10 CVs, how long does it take them to come back? If they're taking more than 3 or 4 days, then you say, I've got a bottleneck there. I need to fix that bottleneck before I do anything else. I need to understand why that hiring manager hasn't looked at the CVs. Have they missed the email? Are they not confident in the process? So the less bottlenecks you've got, and really you should only have one bottleneck at a time, really, because that's the idea behind a kind of a bottleneck. But yeah, the less inefficiencies you've got, and the better your conversions. That's what you can do. And obviously, if you can look at that early, in terms of like a health check of recruitment, that will give you a good indication in terms of what you're doing is actually working. Because normally you would find that if you've got low conversions, or you've got multiple bottlenecks happening, then internally, as you've mentioned, this is something could be wrong in the structure, how you're approaching recruitment, or it could be a disconnect with the external market versus what you think's happening or should be happening as well. And just hoping it gets better is the wrong thing to do. It's
Yes.
like think about ourselves. If you've got a cough and it clears up in 2 days' time, okay, great, it's cleared up. But if you've got that cough after a week, it's not going to clear up. You've got to go do something, seek some medical advice, look at like what you're eating, what you're drinking, are you sleeping enough? You would change something, in that scenario, to kind of find what that symptom is and kind of cure it almost. If not, it's just going to stay around.
And I think what's really helpful here is we're really, really happy to provide a recruitment audit for people who actually sign up with us and with hireful, because I think that's really important. As you mentioned, is you need to get that health check. You need to look at exactly what the bottleneck is. And sometimes you need that support externally, coming in and having a look at what it is. Plus, also, I think it's really important, it's data. I keep saying this, is if there is no recruitment data in your KPI set, which you are providing to your executive leadership team on a monthly basis, you're not actually going to get what you've actually mentioned is about time to hire, time to offer, and that is possible if you've got a really good applicant tracking system. So I think it's again coming really well to this question is, how do you think organizations can move from being very reactive, like we've said, to being more strategic in their recruitment approach?
Yeah, definitely. Again, you can start with data, and it doesn't necessarily have to be recruitment data. This is more HR and people data, which most organizations I would find have a HR system much before they have a recruitment system.
That.
And I would then look and understand things like attrition, length of service,
Yes.
and it'll give you an idea of how long people stay, how quickly people leave. Also be looking at things like people who might be coming up to retirement age. So you've got to think about kind of succession planning for key people, so it's not a surprise. And what you will find is if somebody's worked for you for 20 years, the job they're doing probably has evolved so much that externally that is impossible to backfill, because that unless they've worked for you for 20 years, they're not going to have that skill set, that knowledge of the systems. They could have, be doing health and safety and marketing, because that's just how they've evolved in the business over the years. That doesn't exist externally. So you've got to make a decision about when that person moves on, how are you going to absorb that into the business? And it could be 2 or 3 positions you have to recruit for. So part of it is kind of just looking at that and being ready for the conversation for those individuals. But the attrition data is really, really interesting as well. Not always a negative part. Attrition doesn't have to be negative, but it'll give you an idea if you've got high turnover in a certain area. And that high turnover might be because you've got, 15 people working in that environment. And it's an entry-level role, so people come in and gain 18 months experience and then moves on. But if you're hiring into that role every 3 months, then every 3 months you're going to have 1 or 2 people leave. You're going to have to bring new people in. So it'll give you an idea of when you might need to next recruit for that role as well. So that'll help you being a little bit less reactive in some areas, because you can talk about retention strategies maybe, or you can look at internal talent, or you can just almost start talent pooling externally or work on your employee brand in that particular space. If you're not particularly well known in that area, then let's say warehouse. If people don't know you have a warehouse quite locally, or you don't have a good maybe Glassdoor, or you're in pages telling a story, you don't have a company Facebook page, start one. It's all free. Get people following you, do a couple of posts. Next time you have a vacancy, you might have 2 or 3 people that are known who know of you, who will apply, and they're good candidates, rather than starting from scratch to build up that brand. So that's some stuff you can do kind of proactively as well. And then the other bit about being proactive is just thinking about that network. And one top tip I would have is if I look at my LinkedIn, so, this is kind of maybe more for kind of office-based roles, but LinkedIn kind of covers a real vast network now, is if I look at my LinkedIn network, it may be the same for you. My LinkedIn network is probably made up of 90% HR or recruitment.
Probably, yes.
Professional. So if somebody came to me and said, "Oh, Ben, you're the recruitment manager, or your HR, can you go hire me an accountant or an engineer?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, great. I'll do a post on LinkedIn, or I'll share a job on LinkedIn." But nobody's going to see that.
Yes.
A HR person or a talent person might share that, but they're going to be connected with HR and talent people. So only talent people are seeing I've got this job. Whereas if you've got an accountant, what you want is the finance director or the head of finance to share a job. But if they've not invested in their LinkedIn profile and their LinkedIn network, then they might only 12 people might see it. So my biggest top tip for being proactive is building out those networks early. And that very easy on LinkedIn. Just go through and just connect 10, 15 people a week. So if you're a finance manager, clean your environment, just start connecting with some accountants. just say, hey, looking to expand my local network. We work in the same sector, looking to connect. Brilliant. That's what LinkedIn's for. People will accept that connection. If it's me saying, recruitment manager, you're an accountant, can I connect you? It's like, I'm not looking for a job. I'm not going to connect with that person. So then they're never going to see my posts. Then the benefit of that is if you do all that connection piece, then when you have that finance or that accountancy vacancy, as well as you sharing it as the HR or the recruitment person, you ask the head of finance to share it. Before you know it, they're connected to loads of local talent. They're going to see it. And they might also then be able to go through their individual connections of networks and say, well, actually, this person looks really good, really good. I'm connected with them. I might just drop them a link to the job description and say, hey, maybe you're looking, maybe you're not. But this role's open. Here it is. Apply for it if you want to apply for it. But it's a really top tip to get access to free talent fast and quick. Because at the point of you needing to build that network, when you've got a vacancy, building that network in 1 to 2 weeks is not going to happen. It needs to be little and often. So, I would advise everybody who's a hiring manager or has a team, build out your network. Build.
Yeah, wow. That's a top tip for me, because I did not realize when you really mentioned my network probably is full of HR. But if I'm actually looking for a salesperson, or it's not going to reach anyone, not an HR person's not going to read my post and then say, well, let me forward this to a salesperson. But I do have a sales team if I'm working somewhere, and I'm sure they've got a network, and I'm sure their network is sales or finance or marketing, whatever. That's a really, really top tip. And I think that really leads me really, really well to addressing the elephant in the room now. We've spoken about challenges, we've spoken about best practices, we've spoken about data, we've spoken about artificial intelligence. I think now it's really a time where we say, for organizations, at what time do you think that the organizations stood or should really consider a recruitment system or an applicant tracking system?
Now, I'm gonna keep this balanced because I do work for an ATS recruitment software company. But my honest answer is, every time you have a vacancy, you need recruitment tech, and for the sole reason, and see, I'm sure you can facilitate single vacancies without having to buy a huge tech stack. There's so many options out there, but by actually having a tech stack, the number one thing is compliance, and from a legal point of view, it protects you from GDPR, which is huge. And if you get a SaaS, a subject access request, that is a bit of a nightmare if you've got stuff flying around on email as well. So you can, from day one, that's a really, really good thing to do. And there's so many options out there that if you're advertising or you're running a vacancy with a consultant like yourself, Naseer, or you come to hireful direct, there's always a way we can facilitate some access to some software. And if it's just one-off for 2 weeks, we can facilitate that platform to all your candidate data safe. So I would say there's absolutely no reason now why in 2026, with where we are with tech, there's no reason why you can't facilitate that in some way. So if you're receiving applications via email, I'd say think about that for a second, because there's other options out there that will protect you from that compliance. But on the other side is when we talk about, how to do recruitment well, one of all our challenges is actually having a little bit of software that will collate all your candidates for you. We'll have the, right to work, their notice period in there, their salary expectations, contact information for those candidates, hold their CV. It's going to make your life so much easier because everything's in one place. And when you're asking hiring managers where speed and efficiency is critical to them, and they're overwhelmed with their day jobs as well, it'll make their life so much easier where they can just go to one single place and say, I've got candidates from Indeed, I've got candidates from LinkedIn, I've got candidates from our website, all coming through into one place. And it's really easy for them to see who's been shortlisted, who needs rejecting, who's new, who's old. And when the market is still quite competitive, I know that there's, perhaps not as many jobs, so there's lots of candidates in the market. It's still a really competitive place. for that top talent, which everybody wants to hire. Being organized actually, gives you a bit of an advantage, especially where we still see, hireful works with SMEs. That's kind of where we aim to sell our software. We don't do enterprise. We actually are still selling to a lot of companies, even in 2026, their first ever ATS system. So if you think about how you can give yourself an advantage, actually, find some sort of recruitment software when you have a vacancy will kind of speed up your efficiencies, improve your candidate experience, and give you more of a chance of hiring that good candidate because you're not losing them, you're not missing them. Hiring managers, you're not waiting on hiring managers 2 or 3 weeks to look at CVs. You can do it really, really quick as well, and save yourself hours. Just with a single role. I've got a role on at the moment, and I think at the point of starting this call, I think I had 280 candidates.
Wow.
Apply. So I'm feeling the pinch now a little bit, but where I'm using hireful's tech, so I've got the advantage of AI and neural shortlisting tool in the system to make it manageable for me. So I'm not losing sight of any single candidate as well. So, if you didn't have the system and you got a high response, just because you've got one role, you might get one candidate, you might get 100.
Yes.
Don't make it any harder than it has to be. It's probably my sign up. I could talk ages. I am a recruitment geek. I'm a software geek, but I'd say
I know. That's why, as I said, that's why I've got you here.
Yeah. Don't make it any harder for yourself. So, and there's no pressure. I suppose, if you've got a vacancy, speak to Naseer, and there's no pressure to take the tech, but have a conversation.
No, but again, that's where the problem is, isn't it? It's I have worked with organizations who have the tech, but they don't know how to use it. Who are paying big bucks for an applicant tracking system. I've actually very recently worked with someone who have had the applicant tracking system, really expensive applicant tracking system, not being used. The entire recruitment was done outside because there was no skill. So again, you've mentioned quite a few problems that the tech can solve. Are there any other big problems you think, in your experience in the recruitment industry, that the tech can actually solve? You've mentioned about data. You've mentioned about GDPR. Is there anything else which do you think the tech can solve if organizations, even if they are small, 5, 10, who are still growing, or even organizations who are set up, what problems can tech solve?
Yeah, so I'll probably touch on a couple of things. The first one is candidate experience. So candidate experience is kind of still really, really critical. I don't think candidate experience is really heavily moved on, although there's always tech available. It still hasn't moved on in terms of how quickly we get back to candidates. Some candidates are still applying for jobs and never hearing anything back. Now, with all the tech available to us, that shouldn't be the case. Even large organizations with good ATS systems, are still having bad habits. But what it will help is if candidates haven't heard back for making a job application within 2 weeks, the data suggests that they've assumed they've been unsuccessful, and often maybe even forgotten about applying for the role. So that's the good thing about the tech as well. Is so when you every candidate who applies through hireful, they apply for the job, they get an automated email back saying, not just from hireful because it's all branded as a client. So it said, "Thank you for applying to X organization. We've got your application. It'll take us a week to look at it, but we'll guarantee to look at it and come back to you. In the meantime, why don't you watch this great YouTube video about our organization and our brand?" And generally, candidates are pretty lazy. So if you just said to them, "Go to our website and check out our video," they wouldn't do it. If you give them a link, because everybody's on a mobile phone, get the email, I'll click on the link, they'll watch the video. Now, if you're just having candidates going into an inbox, it's very hard for you to kind of bounce back good content, good ideas. an ATS will allow you to keep candidates warm. So if a hiring manager's on holiday or you're a little bit behind because you've had a high response, you can go select all, send an update. Hi Naseer, we've got your application. We haven't forgotten about you. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. Why don't you read this press release we've just done? Drop it in there, get it sent to everybody. It's been 2 weeks, but you get the email. I'm still engaged as a candidate. If you don't do that, you pick up the phone to Naseer. Hi Naseer, I've got your application here for X job. I'm calling from this SME organization that isn't a household name. And you're saying, never heard of you, don't remember applying. Can you tell me a little bit more? I mean, you're on the phone, almost pitching the job to a candidate who's applied for the job. So it kind of just helps with that candidate experience. It helps you internally as a recruiter. And then the other bit, as well as if it's important to you, is the ATS is very good at collecting your ED&I data in a confidential manner as well. So if you want to understand, the makeup of your candidate market, who's applying for jobs, who's going through to shortlisting, is there any bias there from hiring managers? So you think your shortlist is pretty good, and then the hiring managers made these decisions, then why is they made it? They've only shortlisted candidates who have gone to university. That's a huge bias. Why have they made that decision when that's not an essential to do the job well, or certainly not to get an interview? Why have they made that decision? Oh, well, there was 8 candidates I only wanted to interview 4, so that was an easy decision for me. It allows you to sense check what decisions hiring managers are making, because without the ATS, you're going to have to go through and screen everybody again to kind of see what's happened. So it makes improvements really easy and gives you really good access to data. So going back to a lot of the points we made earlier about how do you know recruitment's working, data.
Yes.
You're never going to get good data unless you've got a system to record it. And that will allow you to say, oh, well, last time we did this job, we had 10 candidates and it took us 60 days to hire and we had to use an agency. We've done loads of stuff differently now. This time we've had 30 candidates apply. We've not had to use an agency and it's taken us 40 days. Well, that worked. So let's keep doing it.
No, and again, another example I can give is I actually worked with one of the organizations a couple of years ago, and they maintained their recruitment data on an Excel document. And then I actually wanted to ask them, I said, all right, let's look at what you've spoken about data. They were producing time to hire data through an Excel, through formulas on an Excel. And it didn't make sense. And again, that information was really, really important, that I took that data on and then I actually could get an applicant tracking system for them, which was really helpful. Again, you get information which I don't think is available on a manual process. And people actually think an applicant tracking system is only to advertise. That's what I wanted people to know about what actually is an applicant tracking system. And so one question I think, which probably is going to be quite useful for everyone here would be is, how does hireful then support SMEs with these challenges you've mentioned?
Yeah,
okay. And what kind of an impact does that have for the organizations you've actually worked with?
Yeah, definitely. I'll try and keep it short because you kind of asked me what is it as you do. So hireful's kind of, I'd say that tagline or kind of like philosophy almost is to be, not just be a good recruitment tech stack, but actually be the most helpful recruitment company going. So, one of our values has been helpful. So again, kind of that's my role. That's why I was hired was, it's not just a case of here's your recruitment system. We're going to teach you how to use it. It'll be a case of, well, how do we get you more candidates? So we would look at a client, and again, a lot of the time, like first time clients have ever had an ATS system. So sometimes they would have like an application form on a bit of paper and it gets emailed out. They would say, well, let's take this and let's just turn it into an online form. That doesn't always, candidates aren't going to fill out a long application form digitally. They might fill out on paper, but it doesn't translate into a digital world. So we work with them to understand how to build out that good candidate experience as well. And then a lot of it is then again, Your structure is actually set up. So we'll do a bit of similar to what you would do. We would work with them and take them through, well, your advert copies are just a job description. So let's work with you on writing some good advert copy. Let's let you understand. You're going to start getting recruitment data for the very first time. We're not going to leave you alone with that, data, just for it to sit there and not understand it. We're going to book in sessions and we're going to talk through your data and we're going to help you identify what are bottlenecks. But also with my experience and a lot of experience, people having recruitment at hireful is, how do we turn this evidence into a solution? What are some practical things you can go away and do as an SME, not as an enterprise system, go and buy, spend £20,000 on an AI stack. Actually, let's design a template where you can sit down in a meeting with a hiring manager for 15 minutes and talk to them about recruitment. And what we also have to remember a lot of the time, a lot of our customers is people aren't, I'd say, always from kind of like classical recruitment backgrounds. They are people who do HR and now have been said, we now need an ATS system. We now are building we're growing to the point where we might have used agencies or we might have been able to recruit at our leisure. We're now to the point where we're a decent sized SME. And if somebody leaves and we don't replace them quickly, it hurts us. So therefore, we need to be efficient with how we hire, who we hire, and therefore, it's now your responsibility to be our recruitment expert. But I've never had to do that job beforehand. And where do they start? So we're just very much here as a extended resource, and it's very similar. That's why we work together, because kind of our values and our approach to the market is very, very similar. We're here to help.
Yes.
We're not here to take over. We're not here to dictate. We're here to say, what's your challenge? What's your frustration? Let's talk through solutions that don't have to revolve around, oh, well, just use our self-service interview booking within the system. It's a case of, have this conversation. Here's why it's important. Here's the data to back up that conversation. Here's how you understand what's the problem and what the solution could actually be. So we're trying to kind of very passionate. We don't use the term passionate a lot because it's a bit of a gimmick term, but we are generally very passionate about adding back to that TA HR kind of family, really, because it's very lonely. If you're just the only person doing recruitment or doing a HR role, you've got nobody in the business to talk to about HR or recruitment. So if you don't know the answer, you don't know the answer. You don't know where to find it. We're there for them to come to and ask for trustworthy advice, being helpful. No problem is too big or too small. We are here to help and guide and kind of support them. Because like I said at the very start, they could take our system. If you don't make a single hire or get a single interview, you're going to look at the software and say, we're not going to renew that. That's a waste of time.
Right. Yes, that's what it is, isn't it?
Yeah. But if you're getting 50 candidates applying for every single job, all of a sudden that HR tool is like, wow, I need this HR tool. How do I get the most out of the technology? And then that's the next part of the conversation we have then. So we create the problem, then we work with them on the solution. Once they've got the candidates.
And I will vouch for what you've mentioned about hireful not just being an applicant tracking system. I have now been partnering with hireful for about 4 or 5 months, but I have worked with all of you pretty much, the entire team. I've met pretty much all of you in your office when I was there a month ago. But it's not just a system; it's the entire recruitment support. What we're offering, we're offering the audit, as I mentioned. You've got the actually supporting in recruiting, not just the system, but also having the entire support in actually finding people for organizations. And I think my final question, and I know you have given quite lovely advice throughout, but if you could give one piece of advice to organizations which are struggling to hire right now. I know there is a huge challenge, not just to hire, but also to retain. But I think it's really important that we talk about hiring here is what advice would you give them if they are actually struggling right now?
My advice would be to probably, pause, take a breath, not focus on how do we get more candidates. We need more like candidates. Do we go on more job boards? Do we go to an agency? Do we do this? Do we do that? Probably there's a decision further back in the process that was wrong. So you need to kind of understand like that root cause. Where did we turn left and we should have gone right? You have to go back to that point in time. And that could be a case of, the essential skills were just ridiculous. Just didn't make any sense. We can't find that person. So going back to basics, now we know that we can't hire this, what do you actually need? If somebody could start tomorrow with one skill set that would make your life easier, what would it be? So, even to give them a chance, what are your 3 non-negotiables? That if a candidate has, you will interview them. And it could just be, 1 year's experience of this qualification and knowledge of this system. It doesn't matter about all the other 10 things I had planned. If they can do this, I can work with them. I can train them up. They can add value to the team. Okay, right. Well, that's what we're going to go out there and hire and attract. And it can be just going back to basics. And most of the time, those candidates do exist. Or sometimes it's about realizing that they don't exist. So sometimes it's just not even pausing, it's stopping. It's like, let's stop what we're doing because it's not working. Let's stop hoping it's going to change. And let's use this opportunity to pivot. And I think that's where SMEs have a real advantage over maybe larger enterprise clients who can't pivot. SMEs can go back to the drawing board very, very quickly. If key decision makers in a room, within 20 minutes, half an hour, you've got a new strategy, a new way to approach the market. But it starts with pausing or stopping and talking. I think that's my top tip. If you're struggling to hire, go back internally and talk, or find somebody externally. Come to talk to me, talk to Naseer, talk to somebody else externally to get a slightly different viewpoint. And it could be something really obvious that you've not spotted because you're stuck trying to solve this problem where the problem's kind of like just hiding over here and you're not tilting your head enough to see it, but someone else might spot it as well. So pause or stop, communicate internally, or just have a chat with someone externally. We're all, not just me and Naseer, there's probably thousands of people who will have a conversation if you just ask them, because we all know what it feels like not to be able to fill a role.
Exactly.
It's one of the worst feelings that you can have in the world of recruitment.
I think that's amazing advice. And I think that really sums up our discussion today, doesn't it? That recruitment isn't just about filling roles. It's about having the right structure. And I keep using this word. It's not a strategy. You're talking about the right structure and the right approach, what you've just mentioned, and the right tools in place, because there are tools out there to support you in your recruitment journey. It's not just about posting a job advert on Indeed or, even now you find LinkedIn being a place where people post the adverts. And if I go there and I have a look, I see 100 people have already applied, or more than 100 people have already applied. I back off because, again, that's I'm going to be one of them, or the candidate is just going to be one of them. So I think it's really important to have the right tools to fill, and also not posting out vague job adverts, which is again going to get you 200, 300 applications.
Yeah.
You really need to be very clear about what you're looking for. As you said, there are tools available now there who if you just post, and I saw this, I said, this is my CV, this is the job I'm applying for, and then the CV is actually made exactly to that job advert. Now, that is going to get you 200 applications. But if you don't have the tools, if you don't have the structure, you're going to be sitting out there, as you said, complaining to the recruitment team, not to the hiring manager.
Yeah.
Get the recruitment manager and say, well, listen, you haven't done a good job. It's, again, I think, really, really important to have the 3 together. And that's what Hireful will be able to support. So, Ben, I really, really appreciate that you've given your time today and some amazing insights.
No, I've loved it.
And to anyone listening, if you are recruiting or if you are looking at your recruitment strategy, please do get in touch with Ethos of HR, and we will be happy to support you with the support of Hireful. As I said, Hireful is our strategic partner. They are the subject experts. We are here to support them. They are here to support us. So do get in touch. Ben, again, thank you very much, and I hope to see you soon.
No worries. Appreciate your time.
All right.